Hi, I'm going to go through the differential case presentation for advanced pathophysiology for Ivy Kelly. I'm looking at patient case number 2, which is a 70-year-old man with a history of CHF, COPD, and hypertension. He currently smokes 1 pack of cigarettes, takes lisinopril, digoxin, and Symbicort daily. He's married to his wife of 30 years and is retired, previously worked as an accountant. He is supported by his adult children and lives at home with his wife. He's presenting with symptoms including shortness of breath, chest pain, flank pain, and fever. The 3 different differential diagnoses that I came up with are acute myocardial infarction, chronic heart failure exacerbation, upper respiratory infection, or pneumonia. The first one of which is the myocardial infarction. The very general streamlined pathophysiology includes obstruction of a coronary artery that leads to ischemia and infarction of the heart wall. It's most commonly caused by a thrombus formed via the atherosclerotic process. Myocardial infarctions are the result of really sudden ischemic cardiac death of tissue. This is commonly caused by a thrombus that travels to the coronary arteries and includes the vessels, causing obstruction of vital blood flow to the walls of the heart. The lack of oxygen causes cell death or infarction of the cardiac tissue. Thrombus formation is caused by the slow-growing atherosclerotic process. The severity of MIs really depend on the location and the severity of infarction. If blood supply can be reintroduced within the first 20 to 30 minutes, irreversible damage to the heart cells can be avoided as long as that blood supply can be brought to the outer areas. The function can most likely resume. But if treatment has not been initiated or is insufficient to meet the demands, the area of the infarction may actually increase. The reason that I'm looking at this is really that the case study presented that the patient is a 70-year-old male that currently smokes a pack of cigarettes a day. He also has history that correlates to the risk factors for MI. Here I'm going to outline them. The symptoms: substernal chest pain, dyspnea, low-grade fever. These are all the ones that the patient is presenting with, which are all very common signs of an MI. In addition, he has many risk factors. He's age 70, which is over the age of 65. He is of male gender. He has a history of smoking as well as being a current smoker, and he also has hypertension. These are all, again, very strong risk factors for an acute cardiac event like an MI. Diagnostics and treatment. There are several tests that we can use to diagnose an MI. ECGs are probably the gold standard. They're used to look for typical patterns associated with the MI, such as ST segment elevations. Blood tests that can isolate certain serum markers that follow typical patterns can be used, for example, to track elevations in lactic dehydrogenase, aspartate aminotransferase, and creatine phosphokinase are specific to heart tissue. You can also look at troponin and myosin levels, which are also really helpful to indicate damage to heart tissue. Again, like with any tissue damage, inflammation usually follows, so tracking inflammatory markers such as ESR and CRP can be helpful for clinicians. Common treatment modalities include applying oxygen to increase perfusion. Medications such as nitroglycerin and vasodilation nitroglycerin for vasodilation during acute angina episodes, and analgesics for pain control, as MIs are rather painful. Long-term treatment include digoxin to reduce cardiac workload or to regulate for arrhythmias, which often result from infarction. Aspirin or other anticoagulants are often prescribed to thin the blood and reduce chances of clots. Pacemakers might be needed if the electrical conduction pathways have been compromised. If bypass surgery may also be indicated if the area of infarction is large and collateral blood flow is insufficient. And again, you always want to stress long-term adjustments to lifestyle are almost always included because you want to reduce stress. You reduce your stress. You want to better your diet and exercise, and these are all really crucial to prevent future episodes. The second diagnosis we're looking at is congestive heart failure exacerbation. This is a general term for the inability for the heart to create sufficient cardiac output to meet the demands of the body. It can stem from an issue with the heart structure itself, such as a valve defect, or from increased demand, such as with something of a chronic comorbidity, such as hypertension. There is both left and right-sided CHF, and generally one side tends to fail first. CHF exacerbations tend to come from non-compliance with medications, uncontrolled comorbidities such as hypertension, as well as with diet, such as just excessive salt intake. Other cardiac precipitants include arrhythmias, MIs, alcohol intoxication, and inadequate CHF therapy. The reason we're looking at this is the patient is currently on digoxin, a common medication for heart failure patients to increase cardiac output. It's also used to treat cardiac dysarrhythmias, which also tend to be a precipitating factor for CHF exacerbations. The patient has high blood pressure. He's on lisinopril. If at any point the patient was non-compliant with his medications or maybe not even regulating his blood pressure well in an outpatient setting, this could serve as a precipitating factor for CHF exacerbations. If the patient just hasn't been to see his primary care doctor in a while, maybe he has been compliant with his medication, but he has not been compliant with his diet. He could have just been having excessive salt intake. This could all be one of the main causes for a CHF exacerbation. Here we're going to look at signs and symptoms as well as risk factors. The patient presents with shortness of breath, common with CHF exacerbations. This is seen because of left-sided heart failure, which also often causes respiratory system to become congested. Chest pain may also be present if the CHF exacerbation was precipitated by an MI, which is very commonly seen prior to exacerbations of heart failure because of the increased workload and inefficient cardiac output. The patient also has several risk factors associated with CHF, including hypertension. He's been taking lisinopril. He might have an abnormal heart rhythm, which could be the reason he is taking digoxin, maybe not just to reduce cardiac workload. He's also a current smoker, likely for many years, meaning he has probably some form of pulmonary disease. This patient could also be taking digoxin because of a prior MI, which is also another risk factor for CHF exacerbation. Physical examination really can add a lot of insight into CHF, including looking for edema of the extremities, crackles in the lungs that would indicate left-sided heart failure and respiratory congestion, or even just looking at elevated BPs, which could mean uncontrolled hypertension. Chest x-rays can show further pulmonary dysfunction, including looking at pleural effusions and pulmonary edema. Echocardiograms can be used to look at the heart and function by checking ejection fraction and if any cardiomyopathy is present. Serum markers, B-natriuretic peptide, can help diagnose CHF as levels are often elevated in heart failure. When you're looking at treatment, you're really looking toward reducing the overall workload of the heart via reduction of stress, prophylactic measures like getting your pneumonia vaccines to reduce chances for infections, which could exert more work on the heart. You're also going to want to look at dietary changes, reducing salt to prevent fluid retention, low cholesterol diets to reduce atherosclerotic progression. Also medications such as antihypertensive, digoxin, and diuretics to prevent fluid retention. Diagnosis number 3 is upper respiratory infection, pneumonia. Again, pneumonia can develop as a primary viral infection, or it can occur secondary to another respiratory infection that compromises the system. It can be caused by bacteria, viruses, or fungi that cause the alveoli to fill with fluid because of the inflammatory process. It's also really commonly caused by the influenza virus. Basically, here the alveolar macrophages activate the innate and adaptive immune responses. Pneumonia can also be caused by atelectasis or from aspiration. So patients with dysphagia are really high at risk of this. The pooling of the fluid in the alveolar sacs proves to be really an excellent growing medium for bacteria to develop and for pneumonia to occur. The reasoning behind this is, again, the patient is over the age of 65, which is one of the most at-risk populations for developing pneumonia. He has a history of COPD, so he's already respiratory compromised. His lungs are impaired. Patient's a current smoker. We know smoke damages respiratory epithelium, making it more prone to infection. And the patient shares many of the signs and symptoms as well, commonly associated with pneumonia. Again, the ones here are outlined and underlined and bolden: fever, dyspnea, chest pain. Again, this is risk factor COPD, age 65 and over, smoking, and CHF. As far as diagnostics, the patient has several signs and symptoms. Really the risk factors that are putting him at risk for developing pneumonia. Okay, wrong one. So we're looking at treatment. Respiratory pathogen panels can be done fairly quickly and inexpensively to test for common respiratory infections. Chest x-rays can be done to see the extent and area of infection in the lungs. Blood tests can be done additionally to see if there are inflammatory markers associated with infection systemically, such as elevated white blood cell counts. Sputum samples can also be sent in to help isolate causative agents. As far as treatment, for the most part, it's really symptom management in terms for viral causes. Antiviral medications such as like Tamiflu can be beneficial if given early, but really antipyretics, analgesics can be help patients with common symptoms. For non-viral pneumonia or infections, antibiotics may be given to help rid the body of infection. Steroids to reduce inflammation. Oxygen supplementally given if perfusion is inadequate, and really just rest and hydrate. You want to break up the secretions and just allow the body to heal and recuperate. So an overall summary, the most likely diagnosis is MI. Given the information presented, chest pain is really one of the hallmarks for MI infarction. And in some cases, it can radiate to other locations, such as the flank, which is one of the other symptoms the patient is presenting with. The other symptoms he has, dyspnea and fever, are also commonly seen for an acute MI. The patient's history also places him at high risk for a cardiac event. He's got CHF, he's got hypertension, he's a smoker, he's over the age of 65. According to the CDC, smoking is a major cause of cardiovascular disease and causes approximately 1 of every 4 deaths from CVD. The fact that he's hypertensive leads to MI as the strain and high pressure on the blood vessels causes them to narrow and become occluded with the atherosclerotic process. All of this could either predispose them to thrombi that could occlude the vessel or really just break off and travel to the coronary arteries, occluding those. His age, gender means that he has more time to have the atherosclerotic process complete, and his vessels have most likely become more inflexible and just filled with fatty deposits with his older age. So all of these really kind of point to an acute myocardial infarction being the diagnosis for this patient. Again, going through those diagnostic tests and treatment modalities as outlined earlier are what's going to be most helpful to determine if this is the causative agent. Thank you. Sorry I rushed through it. Only have a certain amount of time, but hope you enjoyed the presentation.